Coming up on this election 2020 edition of the Newsfeed, how did students vote in this election and why? Plus, those who can't vote share their thoughts regarding the election. And why more younger citizens decided to take part in this year's election. Those stories and more are just ahead. Hello, I'm Tareem Alam. Welcome to the special election 2020 edition of the Newsfeed. The presidential election is too close to call the day after the election. As we're recording this newscast, Joe Biden has a slight lead in the electoral votes, with President Donald Trump edging closely behind. As ballots are continuing to be counted across the country, many would agree this presidential election year has been like none other we've seen in the past. The biggest factor that has made this time different is the global pandemic, which has changed the way many voters would normally cast their votes, and it has motivated those who may not have voted in the presidential elections before. In this newscast, we look at what happened leading up to and during Election Day on November 3rd here at Virginia Tech and in the New River Valley. But first, an update on a few election results in the state of Virginia. In Virginia, Democrat Joe Biden has defeated President Donald Trump in the race for the president. The state contributed 13 votes to the Electoral College. Democratic incumbent Senator Mark Warner has won re-election to a third term, fending off a challenge from Republican Daniel Gade. And voters have approved a referendum that puts next year's redistricting in Virginia in the hands of a bipartisan commission. The amendment to the state constitution caps a year-long effort by reformers looking to end partisan gerrymandering. A bipartisan commission of citizens and legislators equally divided between Democrats and Republicans will now redraw the state's congressional and General Assembly to conform with the 2020 census. As the 2020 election cycle wraps up, we first look back at the massive voter turnout. College students in particular played a large role in the voting population, with more activism via mail-in and absentee ballots than in previous elections. This next story will take a look at how college students voted and what concerns they have for after the election results come in. Newsfeed reporter Madison Storm joins us from the newsroom with more on this story. Madison?
Thanks, Tareem. Many students feel strongly towards their favorite candidate and made a strong effort to vote this year. At the same time, there has been a continuous concern over what's to come following the election results. I spoke to several Virginia Tech students to learn more about what they think we can expect in coming weeks. Over 75 million Americans voted in the presidential election this year, with college students holding a large portion of this population. With thousands being away from their home registration state, mail-in and absentee ballots have become a popular method of casting a vote. There are endless reasons to vote for one presidential candidate over the other, and many students at Virginia Tech are quick to speak out, explaining how they voted and why.
I voted pretty much the first day that I was able to early vote in person. I voted for Joe Biden.
I plan on voting for Donald Trump because he's not perfect. Like, he doesn't fit every single one of my qualifications, but I like him better than Joe Biden.
It's a common belief for millennials and Gen Z teens to hold primarily liberal viewpoints. This is not the case for everyone, though. Many actually expressed moderate and independent views, claiming their vote was cast based less on party and more on which candidate held the most policies the students supported.
I never wanted Biden to be the nominee. He was the last one on my list, pretty much. But it so happened that he got the nomination, and we really technically only have two choices, so it's either pretty much the lesser of two evils.
Some students fear potential riots that could arise based on which presidential candidate gets elected.
I could definitely see that if Trump gets reelected, that there could be riots.
Two of the students I spoke with also expressed concerns over the legitimacy of election results, especially in regards to mail-in ballots. Across social media platforms, there has been a steady increase in the conversations regarding what's to come after the election. Unfortunately, there's no way of knowing what will actually happen now that votes are in the process of being counted. With Election Day behind us, we'll just have to wait and see what's to come for Americans in coming weeks after the next President of the United States is announced. Reporting from the newsroom, I'm Madison Storm.
Thanks, Madison. This election was one of the most unique and tumultuous elections in American history, and to many people, it seemed more important than ever to get out and vote. However, there are many people living in the United States who couldn't vote in the election because they are not citizens. These people have had to endure the news coverage and conversation about the election, even though they had no say in the outcome. Newsfeed reporter Noah Butler has more on this story.
Virginia Tech attracts students of many ethnicities from all over the world. According to collegeboard.org, Tech's student population consists of 35% non-white students, some of whom are international students or undocumented immigrants who couldn't vote in the election. Arturo Roman, a Virginia Tech alumnus, is living in the U.S. on the DACA program. Roman was unable to vote in the election, even though he feels he's majorly affected by the outcome.
I'm definitely affected by it. And it makes me a little nervous because depending on the candidate wins, I might have to leave the country, worst case scenario, or I might get citizenship, best case scenario.
Tim Wu, a Virginia Tech student who came to the U.S. from China when he was 15, says he doesn't feel the effects of American politics and doesn't stay very informed on the current political climate because he can't vote in elections.
Doesn't really matter to me, but I do have a personal preference. So, I would like to know the results after the election, but I don't really care about who wins or who not.
Roman and Wu both said that they don't see the constant election coverage and calls to vote as noise that doesn't apply to them. Instead, they are comforted by the fact that there are so many resources out there to educate people on politics and that people are enthusiastic about exercising their right to vote when some don't have that right at all.
In contrast to those who legally can't vote, many Americans who have felt apathetic towards voting in the past decided to cast their ballots in the 2020 presidential election. Because this year's election has been so polarizing, many who did not vote in the past have realized the importance of doing their civic duty. Voters surged the polls this year, as the U.S. is predicted to have the highest voter turnout since 1900. Many citizens who did not vote past elections decided to educate themselves on current issues and have their voices heard this year. Because 2020 has been a year of unique challenges, even those who don't usually take interest in politics have formed opinions about the candidates. First-time voter Katie Muggleworth recently realized the impact that her vote can have, something she never considered during previous elections.
I was just younger and I didn't understand how much it really does affect the policies that are set for our state. And so this time through, I just recognized that it was really important for me to really go through and form an opinion.
2020 has held many challenges for Americans, including COVID-19, racial injustices, and hazardous living conditions in Western states. These obstacles have been eye-opening and have stressed the importance of political awareness and involvement. Though an election season can be difficult for everyone, increased voter involvement is always something to celebrate. Over 1 million Virginia residents requested mail-in ballots for the 2020 election. Some worried their votes would get lost or wouldn't count. Newsfeed reporter Evan McNally found out what Montgomery County did this year to ensure a fair and accurate election.
This year, voters could request an absentee ballot without a reason, leading to record numbers of mail-in ballots in many locations.
I guess leading up to it, there was talk about how the post office was kind of screwed up so that, it could be delayed and it might take a while for the votes to get back. So that was really why I requested it so early, was because I didn't want to wait until the last minute and then have it get delayed somewhere in a post office and have it come back late. So I wanted to do it early.
President Trump himself said mail-in ballots are, quote, out of control. So what did Montgomery County do to ensure a fair and accurate election? Trina French of Montgomery County's Elections Committee worked firsthand with this year's absentee ballots.
When the mail's returned to us, it comes back in an envelope that has a barcode on it that is attached to the voter's record. So we know that that went out to that voter and it came back from that voter.
So what happened if someone was missing information on their ballot?
Then we have to do what is called curing. We have to call the voter or email them or mail them a letter, however we can get in contact with them so they can either come into the office and fix the problem, or we can mail out whatever needs to be mailed out to them to fix that problem.
Additionally, French said over 14,000 people took advantage of the early voting period, and some decided to trade in their absentee ballots for an in-person vote. Reporting for the news feed, I'm Evan McNally.
For months leading up to the election, voters have registered to vote early and by mail. Newsfeed reporter Jules Beiser tells us more about the process for voters.
With over 2.6 million people voting in Virginia before Election Day, the requests for mail-in ballots were uniquely high. Nearly 1 million voters in Virginia voted absentee.
I decided to request a absentee ballot because I just wasn't sure what COVID would be like. And I think, taking it a little more seriously than some people. So it's like I wanted to be able to vote even if I wasn't comfortable to go to a voting poll.
In the past, this process has been more difficult for voters. However, with the national pandemic, more voters are eligible to vote by mail than ever before. Senior Abby Darko talked to me about her experience requesting a ballot by mail.
Well, for this one, I was a little bit more nervous to go in real life just because I feel like the tensions are really high for some reason. And so that's like one reason why I was like, okay, yeah, I'll definitely do absentee. It was pretty simple. I requested my ballot mid-September, got it by the end of September, and then returned it the first week of October.
For some, the voting process can seem daunting and overwhelming because it's been more difficult in the past. However, with the national pandemic, more voters were eligible to vote by mail and absentee. Voters could even drop off their mail-in ballots and absentee ballots at voting places on Election Day.
Voters seem to be ahead of the game this election year. With a greater voter turnout and easier early voting, Americans seem to be unified on one thing: voting, no matter the means. I'm Jules Beiser, reporting from Blacksburg, Virginia.
As young adults and students, it has always been important to get educated on the parties and their platforms before exercising your right to vote. Student-run political clubs on campus have recognized the role that they play in helping their peers form educated decisions on who to vote for, and encourage everyone to use their voice. One club on Virginia Tech's campus that worked to increase voter turnout and raise awareness about certain polarizing issues is the Students for Life organization. They advocate for a culture where life is valued at all stages and emphasize that a person's position on an issue does not define someone's worth. Throughout the month of October, members of the organization put their efforts into cold calling U.S. citizens to inform them about the party's platforms, provide facts about the candidates, and encourage them to go out and vote.
You should know what your party platforms state. So like for us tonight when we're phone banking, we were letting people know like, yeah, the Democratic Party's like abortion platform is up to 9 months. Like, are you sure you agree with that specifically, and things like that. Just help encouraging people to do a little bit more research.
Efforts were made to connect with Democratic clubs on campus, but no responses were received. Students for Life emphasized that even though the election is over, we can still have a voice and make a change with legislation that is being passed. Election stats are showing that there is a greater number of younger voters compared to 2016. From social media campaigns to advertisements to social movements, younger people are surrounded by encouragement to vote. However, there seems to be individual interest peaking to vote as well. Why are young voters more passionate about voting this year than in 2016 and previous years? I dive deeper into this next story.
In 2016, 23.7 million voters aged 18 to 29 voted in the presidential election, which is 50% of that demographic. But with COVID-19, early voting, and mail-in ballots, younger voters cast around half of the 2016 number within the first week of early voting. But why are younger voters showing out to election polls in greater numbers? From growing up in tumultuous political times to this year's recent political and social justice movements, civic engagement leaders like Jess Davis from VT Engage say the younger generation is already more politically active than in previous election cycles.
You have a generation of students that are coming up who have lived through quite a lot.
How college-age voter turnout specifically looked on Election Day depended on where younger voters cast their ballots.
Voting precinct chiefs have said that in-person voting has decreased around town because of early-in voting. However, on campus, the number of voting is still the same because most are students who are in dorms.
Typically, on-campus voting sites are not great for telling how much more younger voters show up to vote, but the availability of on-campus sites allowed a generation of student voters like Ayana Ashraf to make their voices heard.
Like with social media and like everything that's been going on in 2020, like it's very important to have like your voice heard, and I think people are more active about that now.
Davis echoed Ashraf's outlook on why voters her age are passionate about voting, especially at the end of this particular year.
And so I think, you have just this generation that they've come through kind of so much, and they've dealt with so much, and they're starting to come of age to where, they see themselves as change makers.
Davis notes after experiencing the 2016 election, younger voters are simply looking to make their voices heard by performing their civic duty. Okay. Reporting for the Newsfeed, I'm Turi Malam.
There's more to come on this special election 2020 edition of the Newsfeed. Newsfeed reporter Evan McNally will take you through the second half of our newscast. And he's here to tell us what's ahead. Evan?
Thanks, Tareen. Coming up, we'll see how residents in the New River Valley were getting to the polls to vote. And among nearly 240 million eligible voters in the United States, about 20% are 18 to 29-year-olds. We'll take a look at a group that has worked to mobilize young voters in this year's election. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this short break.
Hey, let's check out this park. Oh, wow, that's really cool. To find a great local park or forest near you, go to discovertheforest.org.
Welcome back to this special election 2020 edition of the Newsfeed. I'm Evan McNally. I'll be taking you through the second half of our newscast. From bumper stickers to yard signs to social media, get out the vote messaging is in full swing. Most political clubs on Virginia Tech's campus have been utilizing social media sites like Facebook and Twitter to tell their followers to vote and give crucial information on candidates. However, some clubs have remained silent. Young Americans for Freedom, a political club on campus rooted in conservative values, have remained silent about the election. The last time the group posted to their Facebook was in September of this year about a picnic celebrating Columbus Day. The group's president, Daniel Eisert, says that while they have forgotten to post, he still wants people of both parties to vote.
Even if someone wants to cancel out my vote or disagrees with me, I think we should vote. There's millions of people who have died and sacrificed their lives to kind of defend a lot of the liberties and freedoms in this country we enjoy, voting being one of them. So yeah. I don't care who you vote for, but everyone should vote. And
the group was not alone in their social media silence. Young Republicans also did not post to social media this year. Eisert said he hopes to post more for future elections. Next Gen America is devoted to making sure younger generations vote. The Virginia branch of the organization is doing their best to get students on and off campus to register to vote and show up at the polls. Newsfeed reporter Emily Carter has more on this next story.
It is statistically proven that voters under the age of 35 have the lowest voter turnout. NextGen is trying to change that. NextGen is a national organization focused on the next generation of voters, but has representatives in 12 states, including Virginia. Megan Willikins is the NextGen campus organizer for Virginia Tech and Radford University. She's been working around the clock to make sure students registered to vote and showed up to the polls on Election Day.
What has been happening more now, so this semester has been trying to get people involved through virtual events, and then a lot of what we've been doing more recently is just a lot of phone banking, just to directly contact voters.
In the past, NextGen would table in high traffic areas like Squire Student Center to get students excited about voting. But this year, due to the pandemic, NextGen has resorted to giving out goodie bags like these to student organizations. Iden Johnny is a Virginia Tech sophomore who voted for the first time this election because she wanted to make a difference.
I think a lot of people think that their vote doesn't matter, and then all those people who think that, it piles up, and if those people actually did vote, then it would actually make a big difference.
Across 10 colleges in the state, NextGen was able to register 12,000 students this semester alone. I'm Emily Carter reporting for the Newsfeed.
2020 being an election year has led to an increase on-campus civic engagement. For many Virginia Tech students, 2020 is the first year they'll be eligible to vote in an election. In the months leading up to the election, on-campus efforts have increased to provide Tech students with resources for voting on Election Day. These include providing help with requesting absentee ballots, as well as offering transportation on Election Day for students. On-campus organizations such as VT Engage have been the front-runners in educating students on Election Day and voting resources. The athletic department has made known their efforts to assist with student athletes with the voting process.
Coaches and directors of ops have encouraged and helped people get registered to vote, and also are there for people to turn in their absentee ballots. Also, social media has been a big part of it.
Within the athletic department, efforts have been made to provide student athletes with assistance requesting and sending absentee ballots. They also mandated an off day for all teams on Election Day. VT Housing worked to ensure students currently in quarantine housing were able to vote as well. They made sure whoever wanted to vote could. The election has pushed many people to the polls to cast their vote. Leading up to the election, folks made plans on how to vote, and for those without access to transportation, how to get to and from the polls. Organizations like the Montgomery County Virginia Democratic Committee has volunteers drive voters without access to transportation each year. The committee chair, Jenny Gallagher, speaks on how giving everyone in the community an equal opportunity to vote is a right everyone should be granted. The group tries to emphasize civic participation in all general and local elections.
Rides to the polls we have been doing at least since as long as I've been involved. I'm sure much longer than that. It's a fundamental right of every citizen to be able to vote, and you shouldn't be precluded from voting just because you don't have transportation to your polling place. This year also, the state party, the Democratic Party of Virginia, has partnered with Lyft to provide free rides to the polls for folks. Every year we publicize that we offer rides. People can call me, and I will pass their information on to a whole host of volunteers that we have. It's an issue that's super important to me, that people aren't left out because they are not of means.
Due to the pandemic, the committee expected a smaller turnout than in previous election years. Voting has never been promoted more than this election cycle. Snapchat, Twitter, and YouTube all tell you to go out and vote when opening their respective applications. Rome NRV, a bike-sharing company based out of Christiansburg, took the initiative to make all of their bikes free on Election Day so voters can't use the excuse that they didn't have a ride. You may have seen people pedaling around on distinctive orange bikes on campus or in town. These bikes are owned by the town of Blacksburg and the Rome NRV initiative. This program is operated by the Gotcha Group under a paid contract with Blacksburg Transit. By offering a bike sharing service, the town hopes to diminish emissions from cars by using a solar bike to get around for a small fee. With the presidential election happening this week, the Bike Share Advisory Committee decided to make all of their bikes free to ride to get people out to the polls to vote. And that will wrap up this special edition of the News Feed. If you have a story idea for the News Feed, let us know. Send us an email at thenewsfeednrv@gmail.com. And as always, you can connect with us on the News Feed on Facebook and Twitter. For Tareem Alam, I'm Evan McNally. Thanks for watching.